Hey folks, this is Kelani. We're ramping up to the last major patch of Legion, which will include the last raid tier, so we're getting to the point where we'll soon be winding down in preparation of the next expansion. But if you wanted to re-roll for the end of Legion or just keep a roster of vaults up to date and ready to raid, there's still one huge obstacle standing in your path: Legendaries. So I wanted to have a look at how the legendary system could be improved or expanded upon to make the end of this expansion a happy, fun times, worry-free roller coaster. So what's the problem with legendaries in the current system we have? I think the most frustrating part of the current system is the layer upon layer of randomness. We just can't affect the outcome in any meaningful way. It's random when we'll get a legendary, and the legendary that we will get will always be random. The only thing we can decide is what spec to get a legendary for, and even that's not a sure thing because some legendaries can drop for any spec. So that's a large part of the problem, but possibly even worse is the fact that legendaries just aren't balanced. For some specs there's clear winners for top legendaries, and others it's a bit less straightforward, but no matter what spec you play, there are legendaries that you would rather not see at all. Obviously, balancing everything perfectly is going to be close to impossible. Some effects will always work better with set bonuses on different fights and a myriad of other variables, which means they would change throughout the expansion anyway. So how can we attempt to fix some of the problems we're currently facing? The first way would be to make the bad luck protection or pity timer more transparent. We don't have anything we can track right now that we can be absolutely sure of. We had a few spreadsheets early on in Legion which estimated your bad luck protection and gave a rough indication of when you should maybe sort of expect your next legendary, but when we don't know how the system actually works under the hood, it's still just flailing around in the dark and hoping we strike gold. If we had a meter, like a rep bar or anything else which is a visual guide to how we're doing on bad luck protection, it would go a long way. We'd be removing a portion of the randomness, as we'd be able to see when we should actually expect to see another legendary if we continued playing at a certain pace. I don't think the dev team would ever actually do something like this though. Having systems like this have full transparency isn't all that common, but maybe a better way to present a legendary system would be with actual requirements and goals. A new currency which is obtained through any type of play could fill the spot of the bad luck protection. When you manage to gather up enough of this currency, you can just outright buy a legendary from a vendor somewhere. This would essentially provide the same kind of gameplay. You run through old raids, dungeons, invasions, whatever gives you the bad luck protection would give you the currency, and instead of crossing your fingers and hoping you've gathered up enough bad luck protection, you can just look at your currency tab. Oh, I need about 2 raids worth more of currency. Sweet, let's go get that legendary. It takes away one of the random factors that we currently have to deal with and provides us with an avenue to target the legendaries we want. But maybe that's a bit too obvious and simple for the dev team, so how about we tackle just one of the random factors instead? Right now, legendaries are thrust upon us like the candy your older siblings didn't like. Here you go, we don't care what it is, but you can have it. Getting the legendaries which don't really do anything to help progress your character because they'll just get thrown in the bank is a bit frustrating, so what if legendaries dropped as a token instead? Keep your bad luck protection, keep your shifty shady you might get a legendary tomorrow or you might get one next month mentality, but instead of rolling the dice for us and deciding what our next overpowered piece of loot would be, give us a token so we can exchange it for our legendary of choice. Everyone would still gain legendaries at the same rate and we still wouldn't have any idea when we were going to actually get the legendary, but we could then prioritize the ones we're most interested in. The issues with this suggestion comes back to balance. Everyone will pick the best legendaries. But so what? Then the legendaries everyone wants anyways. We're going to get those legendaries eventually anyways, so especially at the end of the expansion, I don't see any reason to keep this barrier for entry up for any new players who might be a little behind the times. I'd love for one of these two changes to be considered, especially if the legendary system is taken forward into the next expansion. But what if the dev team stands by their multiple layers of RNG? Well, what if we reduced one of them slightly? I saw a really cool suggestion on a Reddit thread which mentioned the Hearthstone system for discovering cards. If you're unfamiliar with it, the discovery mechanic allows you to pick from 3 randomly generated cards. If we copy-paste that to the legendary system, basically you would loot your legendary as a form of token, but instead of taking it to a vendor and exchanging it 1 for 1 for the legendary of choice, You would use the token and be presented with 3 random legendaries, one of which you would get to keep. Any that you discard would go back into your legendary pool that the token would pull from, so eventually you would get all of your legendaries at a similar pace, but you'd get a little more control over which ones you actually get. Another way to think of it would be you getting 3 legendaries at once, but you only get to keep 1. This could make choices really interesting, especially if you have more than one attractive legendary in your choice of 3. Do you take your single target legendary now, or your AoE legendary now? I feel it would be an improvement on the current system simply because you have to think about it at least a little bit, instead of a legendary being chosen for you. This seems like a really good middle ground between choosing the ones you want and getting them assigned to you randomly. Another thought that I've had recently is that legendaries are kind of a convoluted talent tree. Every legendary is a talent on the same row and you can only pick 2. That's essentially how they're working currently. The stats are nice from the extra item level of the gear that you get, but the main bonus that legendary items offer is their unique effects, which change how abilities interact or just increase the potential of some abilities. They're talents, just very shiny talents which are usually worth a lot more DPS than your average talents. The only reasons I can see to keep these talents tied to a legendary item is first, to give you something to chase after, which has more material value than just a talent, and second, we've got so many talent trees already with our actual talents, our artifact trees, our PvP talents, and now our crucible talent trees. Adding in another one just for legendary abilities probably seems like a bit too much. So instead of talents, how about these abilities are unlocked in a different way? What if you had to collect a currency, once again, but instead of buying a legendary item, you purchased the ability to use your legendary effects in a different system that wasn't tied to your gear? That would keep the legendary effects in play while also removing the need to carry around a bag full of spare gear for when you need to swap legendaries. You could even put the legendary abilities on a rotation of sorts, which might keep things a little more interesting. If there's no interest in trying to better balance some of the legendaries, or it's simply too difficult to get to a good place, put those effects and abilities on a rotation. It could be set up somewhat like the buildings on the Broken Shore. Each time the building was up, the bonus effect was different, and it was on a rotation. When you're given that amount of control over what classes can do in any given week or month, you can also start adding in more and more bonuses. You could throw in 3 or more legendary effects to be active all at once and just tune them however you see fit. You're no longer restricted to just 2 pieces of gear, and you have far more freedom to make changes to the system. It also means any effects that are lackluster are brought to the front, because you wouldn't actually have a choice about whether or not to run that legendary effect. But therein lies the problem with this suggestion. Taking away the player's choice to play with the legendaries they want feels pretty bad too. I'm not sure there's a perfect answer to the current problems we face with the legendary system, so why not just remove it? I know legendaries were supposed to be different in Legion. It was one of the core systems that was hyped up when we first explored the Broken Isles, but I don't know if it's held up all that well. Legendaries were awesome to start with, an amazing piece of gear which dropped randomly as long as you were playing the game, but as soon as you realized that your legendary was actually the worst one you could get, it didn't feel quite as awesome. Then you looked forward to your next one, which could literally take anywhere from a day to a month, and you realized you had no idea when the next legendary would drop for you. It became a source of frustration for the players who weren't lucky, and the players who were lucky just stopped caring about legendaries because the first 2 they got were the best ones. They had no reason to unequip them, so more legendaries was just more used bank space. So why not remove the system entirely? I'm sure we'll have a whole bunch of new and exciting things in store for us in the new expansion, and if the legendary system from Legion doesn't make the cut, then honestly I won't be too sad. I would rather Blizzard left the slot machines in the casinos and let us work for our loot. I guess only time will tell. Either way this goes, I strongly believe we need a clear catch-up mechanic added into the current legendary system, seeing as we're basically at the back end of Legion. The new legendary being guaranteed from a quest is a good start, but a good start at the end of the expansion is probably a bit too late. Having legendaries assigned to major quests or specific story events would also be a stellar idea, but I don't think we've got any of those left in Legion, so maybe that's a potential idea for next expansion. And that's it for this video. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, or hop on over to Discord. We have a server at discord.gg/Kelani, great place to come ask questions or just hang out. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.